Hello, welcome to Doodling. I'm happy to have you here. Today's video is going to be a little bit of a different style from what I've done in the past. It's going to be a little bit more casual. I'm just planning to do a bit of a black and white pencil sketch kind of style. So usually I do big, like full color pieces, but today will be a little bit more simple. As you can see, I'm outdoors today. I'm just hanging out on my front porch in my front garden. It's a really beautiful day. It rained for the first time in literally months. So today I'm going to draw this very handsome fella. This is Eugene. He is an emu at the zoo that I work at. He's quite the character. He's a little shy. He was feeling a little nervous when I was taking this picture, but he was nice and he looked at me, so I got a good shot of his eyeball. So let's sketch Eugene. I'm excited. I'm going for, like I said, kind of a pencil sketch style, something similar to this drawing. It's one of my very first pencil drawings that I spent like multiple hours on. I was really trying to capture all of the detail of this rhino, and it was a big, like, I felt like a big hurdle for me in terms of my drawing process. So we're gonna kind of go for a similar style like that today. So usually when I'm sketching, I like to start by just drawing the outline somewhat vaguely, and I will just slowly refine it. Once I have like a general shape and outline, then I like to focus on darks and lights. So trying to sketch in that contrast as much as possible. So I'm going to start by sketching in the darkest spots that I can see. And as I'm going here, I'm trying to disassociate from what I'm seeing. So rather than being like, okay, the head is oriented a little bit toward the left and forward, and I need to figure out how to represent that. Instead, I'm just thinking, okay, here is this white patch, and the white patch is this shape. So if I get that shape correct, then it will have the effect that I'm looking for. Now I'm noticing that in my reference photo, his head is kind of oriented down a little bit more. This right now looks like a wider angle than it looks in my reference photo. So I'm going to make some adjustments in order to make his head look like it's pointing down a little bit more. And then as I moved his bill down, I realized that his eye is a little bit too high. So I'm kind of scooching that down a little bit too. Obviously, still not quite perfect, but we're moving in the right direction. So I'm going to kind of leave it there for now and move on. And now I'm beginning to notice that his chest comes like way out further than his bill does. Like the tip of his bill is like way behind. So we're going to push that quite a bit forward. And then as I continue to sketch in all of these shapes, it'll help me to figure out if all of my proportions are correct. I can see shapes a lot easier than I can see lines. Like my brain doesn't process if the lines are in the right place, but my brain can process if the shapes are correct. So as I fill in these details and fill in more shapes, it's a lot easier for me to see if things are correct or not. And as I'm sketching in these feathers, I'm trying to notice some of the bigger patterns and get those in first, like this this dark spot here. And obviously, I'm trying to get a similar effect with the feathers, but especially in terms of his back feathers, they don't have to be it doesn't have to look exactly like this. So I'm trying to follow some of the patterns, but especially kind of like this middle area. I'm not going to get it to look exactly right. So just trying to create the effect rather than a perfect replication. As I'm going along here, I'm thinking that the body is going to definitely be the most time-consuming part to get it to look right. There's just a lot going on. But I guess, that is also the majority of the bird, and so it makes sense that it would take a while. Something that I really like about drawing is just how much you notice about the world and about the way that things look when you try to draw something. Like, when I first looked at this photo, I didn't realize that the legs were as shaded as they are. Compared to the top of the body, they're quite a bit darker. And so when I was first looking at it, that's just not something that I would have noticed. So it's kind of fun to have to look really closely at details and colors and shading, and makes you notice things about the world that you wouldn't have noticed before. So now that I've kind of done that first go through, I'm going to start kind of zooming in a little bit and refining details. Right now, everything is kind of As I said, I was gonna lay in the darks and the lights. There's some mid-tone grays, but I think the biggest thing that I'm gonna be focusing on is adding more of those mid-tones. And also, as I add more of those mid-tones, it will also add more texture and more shape. As I'm adding detail, I'm looking at shapes mainly. I'm still trying to kind of forget what it is that what it is that I'm drawing, and just drawing the shape instead. Like right here, there's a strip of white, so I'm adding a strip of white, and then up here, there's like a triangle of white. So I'm gonna add a triangle of white right there, or lighter gray, I guess. And usually the order of things will be like for the bill, I'm adding more of the smooth undertones before I add the smaller details, because it doesn't really make sense to do small details and then do like smooth stuff on top, because it'll just kind of cover up the details. So gotta establish the right tones first before adding the detail on top. It's times like this that I also start to notice that black is not black. Like there's this darker part of the black mixed in with all of the other black. This part is a lot darker, even though it's all black. So reflecting that in here is helpful as well. I think it's kind of cool here how his pupil looks like connected to the side of his, like the feathers on the side of his face. It's something that I wouldn't have like thought that that would be the way that it is, but looking at it, you can't see any of the iris at all. It's just the pupil. As I'm working, I think it's a good habit to like be zooming in and out a little bit. Certain things you can just see from afar. Sometimes if I zoom in too much, I can focus too hard on the wrong details. So if I'm zooming in and out, then I can see both close up and from afar how I want things to look. You can kind of see that the bill is starting to get a lot more shape than anything else, since I've been focusing more on the shading there. Another thing that I like to do sometimes is having some areas that don't have a line on the edge, like right here. There's some light shading, but it's pretty much gonna just like blend into the background, and I think that that also helps to make it look more natural, like it's not perfectly outlined. However, the places that blend into the background are gonna be a little different than my reference photo, especially by his head. You can see that the dark part of his head blends into this dark background, and that's not gonna happen with mine since I have a white background. Something that I've discovered about hair texture is that there is a surprising amount of variation in shades. As you can see, I have some darks, some white, some light grays. So the shading is more than you might expect just by looking at hair. You'd think it'd just be like a few streaky lines, but there's a lot of different shades going on. Okay, so at this point, I've got a lot of the details done, especially with the head, and I'm starting to feel a little bit fatigued, so I'm going to be a little bit more wabi-sabi with the body. So the big things I'm going to emphasize are the shapes, a sort of pointy, liney shape, and then I'm going to try to just do a variation of shades. So I'm just going to do a lot of little small lines. I'm going to do some lighter grays, some darker grays, some blacks, some whites, and just going in the right direction with small lines and a variation of tones should achieve the effect that I'm going for. I found that a trick with a lot of art is just literally just layers. Like you just gotta keep going over and over and over again until you get it to look the way that you want. Oftentimes it just takes patience and multiple tries. Not only just multiple tries, but being like, this doesn't look quite the way that I want, so I'm just gonna slightly modify it, and then just be willing to modify over and over until it looks the way that you want it to look. And as I'm doing this, I'm like not really sure how exactly it's going to look in the end. So I'm kind of just like trusting the process and assuming that it's gonna get to where I want it to go, but I don't like have a super good idea of how I'm gonna get it there. I'm just kind of doing lots of lines and just slowly letting it work itself out. Okay, so I like it. Like, obviously, when you zoom in, you can see a lot of like squiggly lines, and I kind of like that you can see some more interesting texture, that it doesn't look like fully realistic, but you can still tell what's going on, and it still like accomplishes the feel that I want it to have. So now, just for the legs is the last thing. And these are going to be pretty simple. A big part of what I'm doing is just kind of smoothing it out. They're looking pretty rough, so just trying to make it look a little bit more rounded and smooth. And then this is another one of those instances where you would think that the edges would be nice and smooth, but you can see that they're actually the edges of the legs have a little bit of texture and a little bit of bumps. The perfect smooth looked a little wrong because that's not how they are. So this front leg is gonna be a lot lighter than the other leg, and it also has a lot more texture going on, especially with these top feathers. So I'm gonna start with a lighter color first, and then I'll layer in some darker color on top of it. Originally, I just kinda, like, half-assed the shape of the legs, and I drew the front leg a little bit shorter than the back leg, but if you'll notice, it makes it look kinda confusing. Your eye is unsure of, like, which leg is in front, but as I extend this leg, I think it'll make it a lot more obvious the way that these legs are positioned. So, yeah, I can see how simply just having that one longer than the other makes it easier to tell, like, what's happening. And for this texture, I'm trying to keep it somewhat vague. I'm kind of just doing little small horizontal lines in my different shades. But I'm trying to follow general patterns of like, there's some darker part down here. This part in the back is highlighted from the sun. Up here, you can see a few like bigger chunks of the lighter color and some small little dots of the darker color. Just general trends like that. Another hack, if it's hard for you to see the different shades in a colored reference photo, you can turn your reference photo black and white. That way you're simplifying things for your brain, making it so that you're not having to convert it in your head. So now, all that I've left to do is the grass. I haven't figured out how I'm going to do that yet, but we'll see how it goes. I'm thinking I'm going to start by doing just kind of like a shadowed area on the bottom toward the base of the feet. And then I'll draw some like lighter blades of grass, I think. Starting to realize that just the two like shadowed circles around the feet looks kind of dumb. So I'm just kind of going with the good old-fashioned fade and trying to just create a faded effect of shadow and grass beneath his feet. I like that it is pretty subtle, like it looks somewhat like grass and shadow, but it's not too detailed. It doesn't catch your eye too much. I think that the focus is still primarily up in the emu. So I'm gonna do a few finishing touches, but I want to keep it pretty sketchy style, so I'm not gonna go too hard on the touch-ups. All right, so there he is, good old Eugene. I'm gonna zoom in so you can see some of that detail. I left some of this on the outside because I like the imperfect look. And as you can see, zoomed in, especially like on the body, it is just like a bunch of scribbles. But I like how it looks so messy when you're zoomed in, but when you're zoomed out, it looks pretty realistic. So yeah, this was almost exactly 3 hours real time, which for me is pretty quick. So I feel really happy with how it turned out. All right, well, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your support. I hope you enjoyed this video. I would love to hear in the comments what you thought of this style of video. Please like it if you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next video.